Today's episode of The Jai Dave Show is once again brought to you by the Life Force Academy. Go to lifeforce.academy. Ultimate home Kundalini yoga experiences, and right now the Life Force Academy is really on fire. We are live streaming multiple times per week, and all that's also available on demand. I'm teaching Monday evenings and Thursday evenings, 5:30 p.m., live streaming my classes, and then they're on demand afterward, as well as Wednesdays at 10 a.m. And then on Tuesdays, 4 p.m. Pacific, all these are Pacific times, the Simrit sessions. You're listening to her music right now, and I know so many of you love Simrit so much, like I do, and well, perhaps a little different than I do, but you love her music like I do. And she is teaching every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific, the Simrit sessions, and those are amazing. All that in the Life Force Academy. You can attend live, which is a lot of fun. You can attend on demand at any time you want. And during this time, it's so important, keep our bodies moving, great exercises, keep our life force circulating, minds relaxed, meditative, connected to what it is we're all really about, and utilizing this really unprecedented time to build ourselves, to recalibrate, and to reconnect with what are we really here to do. If you have a mind, you have a mission. That's the Life Force Academy. Go to lifeforce.academy. That's the website address, lifeforce.academy, and you can start a 14-day trial for just $1, and then it's only $25 per month after that. And of course, you could cancel anytime. Today's episode of The Jai Dave Show is also featuring Rob Greenfield. He's our special guest today. I think you're going to love him. Go check out his website, robgreenfield.tv. robgreenfield.tv is his website, but also his YouTube channel. Just type in Rob Greenfield into YouTube or his Instagram. He's a really cool person and doing really cool work. You're going to hear about him and hear from him in just a moment. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the podcast. Enjoy the episode today. Hey everybody, this is Jai Dave. Today's episode of the podcast is really cool. This is with a brother I met just about a month ago in Costa Rica at the Envision Festival, and he is really an inspiring brother doing really cool stuff. You're going to hear all about it in just a moment. We have a conversation. He's in France right now, where you'll hear he was about to start a big speaking tour in Europe, and then the coronavirus pandemic hit, and he is now stationed and quarantined in the south of France, and I'm here in Northern California at our home in Nevada City, and we had a great conversation. And we met last month, as I said, at an Envision Festival in Costa Rica, where we were both teaching and speaking, and had a great connection and kept in touch. And I knew some about him, but I didn't know a ton about him, and I learned a lot in this, and he's got a lot to offer us. Rob Greenfield, adventurer, activist, humanitarian. I'm just going to leave it to the conversation to really, let him tell you what he's about and the work that he does. But a little bit into it is he's very much an activist, but he does really far out things to kind of spread the message of the work that he's doing, including living in New York City for a month, and all the trash that he uses every day, or that the standard American person uses every day. I forget how much it is. He tells us in the episode. He had a suit created for him, a transparent suit where all the trash that he used every day, and he made a point to use the average amount of trash that each of us in the United States use each day. He'd have to wear it on his suit, on a transparent suit. So by the end of the month, he's wearing pounds and pounds, like I think 80-something pounds of trash in this suit. You can see it on his Instagram or YouTube pages, and it's pretty interesting and got a huge amount of media coverage, and he's bringing awareness to the certain types of unconscious things that we're doing as part of our lifestyles that are very much non-sustainable, destructive to the planet, but he's also doing it in a light and fun and humorous way to shed light on some pretty heavy issues that we all need to be looking at in our own lives. I think you'll get a lot out of this episode about everything from growing your own food, or starting to little by little grow your own food, harvesting rainwater for drinking water, things that I think it's really topical right now, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. I think you will really enjoy listening to him and the mission that he's on and the life that he's leading. He has like less than 50 possessions to his name purposefully as a really a way of activism and a radical lifestyle to help shed awareness on what are the possibilities and how to live very simply if you choose to. We could all simplify our lives a little bit, and he's a big inspiration, Rob Greenfield. So his website again, robgreenfield.tv, Rob Greenfield on YouTube, Rob J. Greenfield on Instagram, and he's easy to find. So thanks everyone for listening. Enjoy the episode. So you're in France, you said?
Yeah, southern France. I flew here about a week and a half after Envision.
So we met, just to give some people some context, we met for the first time just about I don't even know, like we were just saying before recording, we were at this festival in Costa Rica, Envision Festival, and that's where we met. And because it was pre-coronavirus phenomenon, it just feels like a lifetime ago, but we really just met like a month ago.
It was a month, but it really truly feels like a year or 2 or 5 or a life.
And so you flew from Costa Rica to France?
Yes. Actually, I flew to Berlin, Germany, and I flew there, about 10 days after we met at Envision, and I was flying here for a whole world speaking tour. This whole entire year of 2020 was the World Solutions Tour, and I had about 70 talks or so that I was going to give, spreading inspiration, and ironically, goodness, hugging lots and lots and lots of people was the plan.
What do you mean?
Well, my plan for this year was to be out giving talks, and the thing is, wherever I go, I just like to connect with people and hug people. And, when I give talks, it's not uncommon for me to hug maybe 50 people in a night.
Sure, right.
And so this has just become the exact opposite of hugging lots of people. Instead, I'm now in southern France, and I've been here for, I guess today's like day 24 of not even leaving the property. I've left the property twice, once to go to grocery shopping and once to a farmer market. But other than that, I've been here. I'm in a good situation. I get to go walking in the woods every day, but the opposite of the original plan of being here in Europe.
Well, I was thinking about this, I didn't know a lot of your story. I knew some because once we met, one of the Envision founders introduced you as one of his heroes. That piqued my attention. And so I learned a little bit about you that day when we got to connect, but also last night I watched some. And I was thinking, you're kind of maybe the ideal person to go through this situation. You're probably as well equipped as anyone on the planet to be able to be self-sustainable, number one. But I think it's a nice segue into some of your story, if you'd share it with us. So like how about as a launching off point, what were you going to be talking about on your speaking tours?
Well, basically, yeah, my mission is to get people thinking, get people to really critically think about the world we live in, and, tune out the mainstream narratives that we aren't connected to the earth and that we aren't connected to each other, and just go back to the basics. So what I do is I embark on extreme projects that are really designed to catch people's attention, catch mainstream media's attention, and get them to think about the basics in life. Where does our food come from? How does our water get to us, and how is it clean? Where does this energy come from when we turn on the lights? And all of the the basics of life that in the 21st century are so convenient, and we live in a system where we don't have to think about them. But the problem is that our current system is causing a massive amount of destruction to the world. I mean, I think most people listening to this podcast know that it turns out today that our just simple daily actions are causing a huge amount of destruction and inequality and injustice. And so really all I try to do is find creative ways to get people to self-reflect, think about these things, and ask themselves, are they living the life they want? Are their actions in alignment with their beliefs? And if not, how can they change to be really truly living the life that they want, and a life that's better for the world, that's a life of equality, justice, and more sustainable.
Yeah, you've done some pretty wild things. Let's. I was curious. Where did you actually grow up?
I grew up in northern Wisconsin. Have you ever been to northern Wisconsin?
I have not.
Okay,
Sounds
that's
cold.
because I feel like, how's this wind? Is it windy? Do you hear that?
Yeah, but it's okay. It's fine.
It is? I could lay on the ground too.
Whatever you wish, man. If it's a distraction, I'll let you know. But I think it's okay right now.
All right, great.
You're in the meadows of southern France. It's part of the ambiance.
I should tell people where I am. I'm just on the outskirts of the house that I'm staying at. I'm sitting on a big fallen tree. And it's actually, I just wanted to spend time outside while we were talking.
Cool.
So yes, I grew up in a small town, Ashland, in northern Wisconsin, population 8,620. And it's a beautiful area, and it's partially beautiful because so few people go there. You only go there if you're intentionally going through there. It's pretty out of the way. And I grew up on Lake Superior, which is the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area. So a wonderful place to grow up.
That's beautiful. And so what was your upbringing like? Do you see somehow, like, were you conscious of the types of things that you're conscious of now? Was it a standard American upbringing? What was it like?
Yeah, a little bit of both. So I had, in certain ways, I was living a pretty typical life, but in certain ways it was wildly different. I mean, for example, my mom and dad both were Hare Krishnas for a period of time.
I see.
And yeah, and so they met out in Eugene, Oregon, and you could say they were hippies basically of the town. My mom had long hair down to her waist, and she always had Native American beads, and both very spiritually minded. And so I was definitely raised in a way that was open. I think one of the things that my parents did really well is they never told me and my siblings that we had to do anything. I feel like we were able to kind of make our own decisions. We weren't told that Santa, we were never told like Santa is real or there's just this one God or anything like that. So in certain ways, my life was very different. But at the same time, growing up in rural Wisconsin, my parents were only a small part of, they were only a part of my life. And my dad wasn't around, so it was really just my mom. And other than that, I just grew up in pretty standard American way, just consuming American mainstream media, the movies, the clothing, the society. So I had some influences that were very close to me, but really, I actually was really trying to avoid that. I wanted to be normal because I did stand out. We were Jewish in a place there were no Jewish people, poor, and I didn't have a dad. We lived in a really crappy duplex, 2 bedrooms with 5 people, my mom and us 4 kids. So really, I wanted to avoid all of the things that kind of stood apart, and I was just trying to fit into the American dream. I remember I loved plastic Tupperware, which is the epitome of the American dream.
Wow, that was your passion, huh?
Well, I liked other things too, but I really liked my friend's plastic Tupperware because we put everything in glass jars.
I see, and you were like, whoa, look what they got over here.
Yeah, basically I thought all my friends, most of my best friends were pretty wealthy, and none of them used glass jars. They all used plastic. So I thought I associated glass jars with poor people,
right,
and plastic with wealthy people. And so that's what put me on the goal of just living the normal plastic American dream.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, I grew up in South Carolina, Jewish, upstate South Carolina, and at least on the part of the area where I lived, I went to a relatively large school, and myself, my brother, and then my sister were the only Jewish people at our school. So similar situation there. So all right. So that makes a lot of sense. You're in a northern Wisconsin. So then, how do you get from there? What is the kind of the catalyst that starts to turn your life in the direction that it's now has expressed itself as? Where are you? Are you still in northern Wisconsin? Do you go off to college? What happens?
Yeah, so I went to school in southern Wisconsin, not too far away. It was about a 6-hour drive, and what happened was I became very focused on partying, basically, chasing women. Part of me, not really for me, was a big part of the American dream, because in high school I was watching movies like American Pie and, movies that really sensationalized partying and chasing women. And so my goal was to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. I was quite focused on material possessions and financial wealth. And I continued that, for my early 20s. And then in 2011, about 2 years after university, I moved out to San Diego, California. I started to surround myself with different people. A lot of my new friends went to Pacific College of Oriental Medicine for traditional Chinese medicine. And I started to watch a lot of documentaries and read a lot of books. And what I just learned was that I learned basically that the American dream is the world's nightmare, that almost every single thing that I was doing on a daily basis was causing destruction to the world that I loved. And the thing was, I always loved the environment. I always loved animals. I always loved people. But I didn't know that my standard American life was causing destruction to everything that I loved. And so basically I had a big shock, a big wake-up call. And I realized that, well, I have to radically transform my life. I was 25 years old, and I realized that if I lived to be the average life expectancy, I still had another 5 decades on Earth. And I decided I wasn't going to live those next 5 decades as a hypocrite, and that I had to change my life now.
And was there anything in particular that you're early 20s, you move out to California, you have friends studying Oriental medicine, and is it just naturally you're being exposed to things here and there? Or is there anything that really catalyzed this kind of eye-opening experience?
Yeah, it definitely was no major moment of enlightenment or any aha moment. It was really just educating myself. And I've always been a fairly rational, logical person. And when I realized that I was being lied to, was a big part of it, that corporations had sold me on these ideas, and government and mainstream society had really just kind of...
Give us an example of that. So unpack that a little, yeah.
Yeah. So here's an example of that I think about often, and that is Old Spice deodorant. So I grew up,
Cool.
I had this idea that to be able to fit into society, for people to like you, you couldn't smell, and you had to wear deodorant. And I learned a little bit about deodorant and antiperspirant, and I learned that the way the antiperspirant works is that it blocks the sweating, which is obvious. It keeps you from sweating. And one of the things that it uses is aluminum, and that's associated with, that's been traced to cancer. And so I also started to think, well, okay, if the body's sweating, if it's trying to perspirate, maybe it's supposed to perspirate, and we don't want to keep that stuff in us in the first place. So this was an example of me realizing that a corporation was making billions of dollars selling me on the idea that my very existence was bad, that people would only really, like me and love me if I used their product, and that their product was actually harming myself and other species and other people and other species, because this was toxic stuff that was going down the drain and polluting our water.
Mm.
And so that's just one example. Another example was, really learning about where our fossil fuels come from, realizing that every time I pumped gas into my car that I was contributing to war, and, learning that there's a routine 10,000 oil spills that happen per year. We hear about the really big ones, but routinely 10,000 oil spills happen per year. And that's not, they don't show that on the pictures when they're promoting their products. And so I just realized that most of the companies were leaving out really important parts, and not just leaving it out, but a lot of the times actually, downright lying to us.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of us learn about this stuff and are either outraged or we metabolize it however we can. Most of us, I think, don't have, we feel, it's difficult to find what can you even do about it. It's such a huge, massive system, and we all feel so small. So, but in your case, you figured out things to do about it in really unique ways. So where does your thought process go from here? So how does that start to begin?
Well, yeah, I just decided that I was going to do something about it very quickly. I learned the problems, but I also learned that there were solutions. A lot of the documentaries and the books that I was reading, they weren't just doom and gloom. They often ended with, well, here's alternative ways of doing things. I learned that my food was coming from factory farms, that it was being shipped around the world, guzzling fossil fuels. Pesticides are being sprayed all over the place, that people were working in horrible conditions, and the people spraying the strawberries were having higher rates of cancer and respiratory diseases. And so, but I learned that there's actually different agriculture. There's regenerative agriculture. There's local farms that don't use those practices and that actually love their people and love their animals. And so I just learned that there were alternative ways of doing things. And so what I did is I've been a very goal-oriented type of person naturally. And so what I did is I made a list of goals. I made a list of all these changes that I wanted to make in my life, and sort of set myself a foundation of how I could change my life, how I could get myself out of this deep, deep hole that I had dug myself into, and get myself to a point where I could actually start to wake up really feeling good about my life and go to bed feeling really good about my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I started with small things. At the time I was shopping at Walmart for everything. And, just at first it was just things like using reusable bags. And then quickly it was realizing that everything at Walmart's wrapped in plastic, and that Walmart's a company that I don't support at all. So switching over from Walmart to local businesses and local farmers markets and such. And so for about a period of a year and a half, I was just changing my life as much as I could, trying to make a couple positive changes or a positive change per week.
Right. And did you have any particular, I know you were reading a lot watching documentaries, was there any particular people who stick out who were inspiring you at the time? Any thought leaders, writers, etc.?
Yeah, well, I was inspired by Gandhi pretty early on, as well as Martin Luther King. And even before this, I remember learning about Thich Nhat Hanh. And so even before I had, realized the environmental lie that I was living, I had just learned about mindfulness and presentness a little bit. And so early on, there was a bit of a foundation by Thich Nhat Hanh. At that time, I was very inspired by Yvon Chouinard, who's the founder of Patagonia. I was running a business myself and wanted to do it in a better way. And Jack Johnson, the musician at that time, was also pretty inspiring to me because of the way he used his music. So at the time, yeah, I definitely had a lot of inspirations, people, and those are some of the people at that time that could come to mind.
What's the deal with the Patagonia owner? What's his name again?
Yvon Chouinard.
And
yeah.
And why would it? I don't know. Well, I don't know the story there. What is in brief? What is Patagonia about?
Well, Patagonia is one of the most environmentally focused mid to large size companies on Earth, and really they have changed the way a lot of businesses do business. They're one of the early adapters of corporate social responsibility, where they actually took responsibility for their actions. When basically he woke up and realized that his business was causing a lot of destruction, and he was causing a lot of destruction. And so this was probably in the 80s, realized that they had to transform their business. And for example, they were the first large business to go to 100% organic cotton, and they transformed part of the cotton industry because of that, and switching over their products, changing the way they were designing business. They, early on had in-home or in-business daycare and gave maternity leave, and they just really kind of examined everything and changed that. And the founder, Yvon, was definitely one of the real influences. And also they started a nonprofit called 1% for the Planet, where businesses commit to giving 1% of their annual revenue to environmental nonprofits. And that's what I did with my business. And I found that to be really inspirational. And they've given maybe over $100 million to really radical grassroots activists and nonprofits that are really fighting for, positive change. So
it's cool. So it's 1% of gross revenue?
1% of total revenue for businesses. So it's a meaningful amount. For a lot of businesses, it's a pretty meaningful step forward.
Right. That's real interesting. I'm like, I look at and listen to your story, and just it's reminding me that we all kind of come to similar things through different pathways. I learned so much of the same stuff, largely via yogic path, even to the level of deodorant. One of my first yoga classes, I learned about antiperspirants and how you need to sweat, and how if you're using, and to this day, I stopped using antiperspirants at that moment. And now I use the rock salt, little sandalwood oil, and it's great. It works perfect. And all these things improve our lives so much. And so, like, regardless if it's, via some kind of yogic system as it was introduced to me, or something else, this kind of unique organic path that you've taken, the whole thing is it is a type of, whether it's the environmental movement, spiritual movement, it's awakening of a consciousness, and you can't separate the things. You can't separate spiritual movements from environmental movements from this. And I think that's part of, like, with coronavirus and everything right now, we're starting to see that. Like, you started off, when you were talking about what you were going to be talking on this world tour, or this European speaking tour you were about to go on, how how we're all connected to each other. And that's so much of what your work's about. And isn't this virus teaching us that as powerfully as anything we've experienced in our lives? Like, how something that, apparently started in China. We're in Costa Rica. They're in lockdown while we're at Envision Festival in Costa Rica. All of a sudden, we come back, and within a couple of weeks, it's spread across the planet, and we're all being affected by it. It's a pretty powerful moment right now.
It really is, and it's definitely something. I think it's actually it's an amazing example to show how deeply connected we are. You know, this started possibly with one person in one little corner of the world, and within a few weeks, it had spread to many corners of the world. Within a few months, it has reached almost uh, every one of the countries, and it's reached millions of people. And really, it's reached most of the people on Earth through the way that it's affected our society. And and it all starts in one little spot. Now, that's the reality of our entire globalized lives. That is what globalization is that all of our daily actions are connected to people all over the entire world. Not that long ago, when you did something in a given day, like just a couple hundred years ago, you pretty much knew the results of that because it was only going to generally affect the people near you, the species near you, the environment that you lived in. But now the reality of our globalized lives is that everything we do, the food we eat, the electricity we use, the cars we drive, the chairs we sit on, the technology that we speak into and look into, every single one of these is deeply, deeply connected to people all over the world. And I think that coronavirus is a really interesting example that can help people to finally really understand the reality of our modern globalized lives.
Yeah, it's like the earth is teaching us. You've done
Yeah.
so you've taken like a pretty what riveting path in terms of how you're addressing this, addressing the realizations that you have had in your personal life and just in general. Um, Tell us about that. Like, so what did you, with all this kind of awareness that uh, came to you, how did you, what did you do to change your lifestyle? I know a little bit about it, but kind of break it down for us because you live right now very, very simply. How did that happen?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Basically, I live a radically different life than I did before. My goal was to be a millionaire. Now I have $4,000 cash in an envelope. Everything that I own fits in a backpack, it was 44 possessions last I saw you, but it's about 50 now because I'm in a colder environment. And I have no bank account, no credit card, no life savings whatsoever. You know, I used to have mutual funds and life insurance, nothing whatsoever. Literally, I am wherever I am quite present in that place by having drastically simplified my life. I've committed to making less than what's considered the federal poverty threshold per year. So I've made under $10,000 each of the last 3 years. And the idea of that is to really focus my life not on money and not on material possessions, but on living a deeply meaningful, purposeful, passionate life and doing that in a way where I can really positively impact the world around me. And so, yeah.
And why? I know you just answered why, but why do you think? Why are you? Let me say it like this: why are you choosing to go to that extreme in terms of meaning, living a meaningful life?
Well, I will say that naturally being extreme, being extreme comes natural to me. I've always been sort of an extreme person and I've always just taken things to the extreme, even as a young person. You know, at the time it was, just more mundane things like sports or collecting beanie babies. I had 700 beanie babies when I was in sixth grade. So I've always taken things sort of the extreme. And so it's partly just being me. But
Mm-hmm.
the big thing is that the reason that my life is extreme is because we live in an extreme time. So the United States has 5% of the world's population, but uses 25% of the world's resources. That by definition is extreme. The whole world can't live that way. The whole world can't even come close to living that way. And so the reality of our current society is that it's built on very extreme extraction, extremely destructive relationship with the world. So what I decided that I had to do was go to the other end of the extreme, because my goal is to really wake people up. I want to shock people. I want people to look at what I'm doing and self-reflect. Just by seeing the things that I'm doing, I want people to instantly start questioning their lives.
So tell them about what you did in, sorry, brother. Tell them about what you did in New York City.
Sure. Yeah, that was one of my favorite projects 4 years ago. So the average American creates 4.5 pounds of trash per day and never really thinks twice about it. The garbage goes in the garbage can, and it's out of sight, out of mind.
How much did you say per day?
4.5 pounds per day.
4.5 pounds per day.
Which is, that's 135 pounds a month, or close to a ton of garbage per year per person. So it's a staggering amount. And so I wanted to create a visual that would help people to really understand this staggering amount. And so what I did is, for a month, I lived like the average American. I shopped, I consumed, I even went to McDonald's like the average American. But I had to wear every piece of garbage that I created. And I had a specially designed clear suit to put it all in so that it was all visible. Right. And each day I added every piece of garbage. By the end of the month, I was wearing 87 pounds of trash. And I just tried to live like the average person. I went to the movie theaters. I went grocery shopping. I walked around New York City. You could find me in Union Square Park, wherever. And the idea was just everywhere I went to just be a wake-up call to everyone that I came across.
So anytime you were going out in public, you had to wear the trash that you had used that month. So day one is probably just a little bit of trash, and then by the time we're getting towards the end of the month, what's that like?
Yeah, it was about the first couple days, to be honest, were the most awkward, because I just had this little dabbling of trash on me, and it was like, what are you doing? Like the visual wasn't there yet. It took about a week before I started to actually feel comfortable, and it was about a week in. The rule was I had to wear my garbage anytime I left the house. At home, I didn't have to be wearing it. And so at home, what I did is I had a mannequin that I would put the trash suit on so that it was always looking at me, at least when I wasn't wearing it. But what happened was, it was around day 10, the mannequin broke under the weight of the trash suit. So then I had to throw the whole mannequin inside of the trash suit as well, which added like 10 pounds right there.
Wait a second. So I'm on your Instagram right now, and I'm watching this video of you wearing the trash suit. On day 30, you're trying to get through the door of your apartment or wherever you're staying. I think you're getting somebody's trying to push you into the trunk of an Uber or something like that. You're walking around Union Square Park with a microphone. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
People can go. Let me give them your Instagram handle. Rob J. Greenfield is the Instagram handle. ROBJGREENFIELD. Just how it sounds. Rob J. Greenfield is. You have a real big following too, man.
Yeah, well, I've been doing this for about 7 years now, and
these types of kind of, what do you call them? They're almost like tactics, or like, do you have a name for them?
I guess I just call it activism. Activism campaigns.
Yeah, activism campaigns. I love that. Is that how your following online is built?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, the Trash Me is, one of a dozen or 24 different projects I've done over the last 7 years. But I also it's both the activism projects and then just life, just living in a way that makes people interested. I would say that's kind of the one main common themes, is that when I talk, people are like, okay, what do you mean? Like, it's a different perspective. So I guess it's pretty much just having a different perspective that's built the social media. And then also just I will say that I've always just been naturally, the reality is that I've been always an entertainer. Even in high school, I was the class clown. And so when I woke up, I said, how can I use what I naturally am? How can I use my natural talents to be a part of the change? And that's really one of the most powerful things that I've seen for as a general, suggestion in life when people do ask about how they can, be a part of the change, is that it's follow their passion. It's do what they really love, that they're going to want to wake up and do each day, and figure out a way to really make that, make it not a part of the problem, make it part of the solution. And that's what I decided to do pretty early on. So it kind of just flows pretty well.
Yeah, that's what I love about your story. The kind of heart of this podcast in general is I like talking to people who, the semantic I use is they've concentrated their life force in a relatively singular direction, and then what the type of really kind of just magic or purpose that is born out of that. And you're a great example of it. I'm still kind of like watching this video. My favorite parts are when you're sitting down. Some of my favorite parts, you're watching TV, eating pizza with all your garbage on. You're a goalie of a soccer game with all your. It almost looks like it'd be better if you were playing hockey with your trash.
Hockey would have been good.
It's really good. So, did you get a lot of media attention for that?
That was one of the most successful campaigns that I did. We calculated that we had about 1 billion media impressions over that 2-month period.
Really?
And I mean, the reality of media impressions is they're calculated. On Facebook, for example, a view of a video is 3 seconds.
3-second
which
watch, right?
It really shouldn't count as a view.
That's just somebody scrolling by.
So in the media world, we had over 1 billion media impressions. But that aside, I mean, it worked so well. I mean, there was, on the average day, I might have 4 or 5 media interviews and, different news teams following me around. And it worked because it was a visual, and we live in a visual world. And so it was a visual that was so easy to understand and able to tell a much bigger picture, though. It wasn't shallow. It was something that could be sensationalized, something that was just, anybody could be interested in a guy walking around in his trash, but it had an important message to it. And so that was definitely one of my most successful campaigns as far as getting media to report on an issue.
Yeah, it's really cool. And if people watch the video, it's less than 5 minutes in total, but it not only does it show all of that, all of this stuff that is, has good comedic value as well, which I think is important. But it ties it into, solutions that go far beyond what you're doing. Obviously, what you're not suggesting a solution by wearing trash, but you're opening people's eyes. And it's beautifully done. It ties it into the bigger picture. Yeah, man, of course. If we can laugh, for instance, like right now, typically if I want to watch the news, I'll turn on Trevor Noah or I'll listen to Jimmy Kimmel or something like that, because I know I'm going to get everything I want to know, but I'm actually going to laugh while getting to know it. And this is cool, man. I really love this.
Yeah, it's definitely playing into the reality of that. That people, early on when I started things, my formula was to entertain, educate, and inspire, because I realized that if you want to reach the masses, I was going to say you have to entertain if you want to reach the masses. That's not true. There's definitely other ways, but generally the masses, they want to be entertained. They want to laugh, or something along those lines. And so that's always been a central part of how do you get people who have not thought about, their life? How have they not thought about how their life affects other people and the earth, and just question the reality of their life? How do you get people that have never thought about this before? And so my thought is, well, you gotta be entertaining and reach those people that you wouldn't otherwise have reached.
And furthermore, how do you do it without people feeling vilified or feeling guilty? Because we're all playing a part in this, and we're all learning about things we're learning that we're contributing to destruction. We're contributing to really horrible things without knowing it. And so how do you actually open our eyes to difficult things to metabolize and difficult things to come to grips with? Because otherwise we're going to like push that away. Like, I'm not going to look at that. But if you can get somebody to laugh, and you can kind of transmit this feeling that really this is all of us together. There's not a us and them thing. There's not people over here that are the villains in this, and then there's people over here that are the righteous ones. Because that does happen a lot, especially with activism and with things, because there is, and reasonably so, there's so much outrage that it tends to go in that very polarized direction. But when the things that I've watched from you, including the TED Talk I watched last night that you did, you make people laugh. It's warm. It's not pointing fingers at anyone in particular. It's very inclusive of yourself, and I think I sense that's a big reason why you're as effective as you are.
Yeah, the one thing that I've learned is that you can't put up walls, because so if someone becomes defensive, if you put them in a situation where they feel defensive, they automatically put up a wall, and their job now is to defend against anything you're saying. And so if you want to be effective as a change maker and as a person who's opening people's minds, you have to make sure that you don't do things that put up walls in people where they feel open instead of blocked. And I just want to say that, when I came to a couple of your classes at Envision, and I just sat, honestly, I mostly came just to watch you, because I was like, all right, I feel a really good connection. And what I mean by that is just, in today's world, when you do look at change makers, there are so many that are saying there's only one way to do this. This way that I've discovered that works for me is the right way. And you see so much of that in the activism world and in the world of, enlightened people who do want to change the world. And I saw that in you, that, you're just so genuine and authentic and just being yourself. And I think and that's one way that I relate to is I just think that it's so important to just really just be what you're speaking about. And I think that today that's a really powerful thing to do. And one reason it is so powerful is because you actually meet such a small percentage of people who are really living out their beliefs and what they're saying. And that's why I just so thoroughly enjoyed hearing your talks and just sitting there and soaking it all in while I was at Envision.
Right on, man. That's one of the cool things about being at Envision or places like Envision is we get to connect like that. One of it made me think of Paul Stamets. I just watched. Have you watched Fantastic Fungi, the new film
I've
they
been
put out?
meaning to every day, but I haven't yet.
It's definitely a must watch. I saw it they showed it. The filmmaker Louis Schwartzberg showed it at Lightning in a Bottle festival last year where I was teaching, and I got to see it on a big screen there. And it's really, it's a beautifully done. In addition to the education, you're definitely getting entertained with the visuals, and it's one of those films that I don't know how many people will see it, but it's one that anyone could really enjoy. It's eye-opening, but within a context of really great solutions and great hope. And anyhow, it's awesome. And
I'm really looking forward to watching it. Maybe tonight. I actually tried to, with my host family where I'm staying, we tried to get it on the TV a couple nights ago, but it wouldn't work. So try again.
Yeah, try again. So what are some other campaigns that you did?
Well, my first ever campaign was to bike across the United States on a bicycle made out of bamboo and try to cross the country having no negative environmental impact. And I've done 3 bike rides across the country now. And the third one was called Green Riders. And that one was open to everyone who wanted to join. And we showed up in Central Park in New York City. I didn't know how many people would be there. And I think 29 people showed up. So about 30 of us ended up biking across the country together, doing good deeds, planting trees and fruit trees, and volunteering at gardens, and just generally doing good deeds.
How long did that take?
That trip was, the 3 trips each were about 3 months or so.
And where do you sleep?
We sleep in many different places. I have slept in a very, very, very wide range of places, from your standard campgrounds, or there's websites like Warm Showers, which is a network of cyclists who host cyclists, to you're in Nevada City?
Yep.
And is that just over the border from California?
Well, we're in California, so
that is California.
So once you go like cross over to Lake Tahoe from Nevada into Lake Tahoe, and then we're about an hour's drive further down the road.
So not where I was thinking of, but some, like on bike trips like that, I would sleep in. I slept in in parks, or I'm trying to think what's the city hall, like in the lawn of the city hall,
and so all 30
buildings.
Of you would be in there when you're doing
when
it
it was 30 of us, we had to organize things a lot more. So we did have a lot of cities who we got permission from to camp in the park, for example, but a lot of backyards and then campsites as well.
Cool.
So it was a really great trip. That was in 2017. Another one of my projects was, basically, I think when you turn on mainstream media, it often portrays the world as a very dangerous, violent place. In the United States, Mexico is, by a lot of media, portrayed as this dangerous and violent place. And so to create a counter narrative to that, I did a trip where I landed in Panama from San Diego with no money, just the clothes on my back and passport, no credit card, no cell phone. And I had to make it back to San Diego, both on the kindness of others and then resourcefulness. And I landed there with, nothing, no plans. And it took me 37 days to get back to the United States. And when I got back, like, the only words I could muster out of my mouth were just, people are good. That's just genuinely the experience that I had. And that was another project of mine.
That's really cool. That's generally the experience I have every time I travel, no matter where it is that I travel to. People are good. And the xenophobia that exists in, I'm sure it exists elsewhere as well, but that the media portrays, especially right now in this area in our country, is so jaded and so just a distortion of what things are really like when you actually get out there.
It really is. And the thing is, when your day revolves around the TV and turning that on, and it's what you see maybe 7 days a week or 5 days a week, it starts to become your reality. And it's if it's your exposure to the world, it's very easy. That's what you start to think the world is. And I've worked with a lot of media, and there's a saying in media, and that is, if it bleeds, it leads. And I've talked to a lot of journalists that work in, the standard nightly news, local nightly news. And they said that, that if there's 15 stories in a half-hour news show, usually about 12 of them will be negative. And so that just, of course, that's going to make people who watch that think that the world is this bad place. And of course there's violence and there's bad things that happen out there. But the reality is that the majority of people are really good people. And that's what, we've seen. And that's what most people who have really gone out there and seen the world have seen, that most people are pretty decent people.
How do you live so simply? So tell us a little bit more about your daily kind of lifestyle, not necessarily right now during coronavirus, but in general. How do you live as simply as you do? Like you said, when we were in Costa Rica, you had 44 possessions. Now you're in a little colder environment, you have 50. And I don't get the sense that you're recommending this lifestyle to everyone, but hopefully that your lifestyle will catalyze a adjustment in many other people's lifestyle, at least in maybe less extreme ways, but important ways. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I am not telling anybody that they should do exactly as I do. I set the bar really high to give people inspiration and show what's possible so that they can start taking their first steps. And for people who have done, nothing, who have like woken up but haven't made any changes, I serve as sort of that inspiration, and I can give tips on the very beginning. But also for people who have already taken it quite a few steps and maybe already are considered extreme, by me going so far to the extreme, I'm still able to be of service to them and still provide inspiration to them. And so, yeah, by me owning 44 possessions and, living with so little money, the idea isn't for anybody to do that, but the average person has a couple 10,000, I think it's like 10, 20, 30,000 possessions. So it's about reducing down to what it is that really serves you and not all the other stuff that actually takes away from you. So as far as how I live my life in order to facilitate that, well, when I lived in Orlando, which is where I lived for the 2 years up until I just left 4 months ago, I built a tiny house there, 10 foot by 10 foot, so 100 square feet, out of about 99% secondhand materials for about under $1,500. And then I did a year of growing and foraging 100% of my food. So no grocery stores, no restaurants. And so by doing that, food is one of main expenses for people. I grew and foraged 100% of my food.
Hold on. Can you unpack that? Well, first of all, why Orlando?
Orlando, because I wanted to be somewhere warm. As a rookie who had grown almost no food in my life, I wanted to have the comfort of being able to grow food year round.
Yeah.
And yeah, to unpack it, this was another one of my.
Well, how come not like why Orlando out of all the places in Florida? Did you want to be in a city for a reason?
Yeah, I did want to be in the city for a couple of reasons. One, I needed a large resource base. Since I was pretty clueless, I needed to be around a lot of people I could learn from. And I found a great group of permaculturists based in that area. And then because I don't have a car, which is another example of how, not needing money and living simply. I wanted to be centrally located so that I could, if I was out in the countryside, it just would have been without a car. It's very difficult. So I wanted to be centrally located, but along the lines of that, the reason I wanted to be centrally located is because I built all of my gardens in people's front yards, right where it was publicly accessible. All my gardens were publicly accessible to people. And the idea was that people would walk past these and see what was formerly lawns turned into food gardens and be able to do things really publicly. I mean, my little free grocery stores, I built all of them around the neighborhood. Every time I wanted food, I had to go out into my community to get food. So it was just another, like Trash Me, where I wore all my trash. Well, everywhere I went, you saw me with my bicycle trailer hauling huge amounts of food or gardening equipment. And I did lots of free gardening classes in my gardens. So it really got the community involved and got hundreds of people growing their own food that weren't growing their food before. And that was a big part of the wanting to be in the city.
And you were able to start these gardens without really much money, or did it cost? What were the costs involved with it? Because you don't live with much money.
Yeah, minimal. So my main garden, and I want to cover as far as the living simply part, a couple other small things on that. So where I set my tiny house up, what I did is a work exchange. I built my tiny house in someone's unused backyard, and in exchange for using that space, I built them a front yard garden, and their dream was to live sustainably. So I was there helping them, teaching them how to harvest rainwater, and I had bees and all these things that they really wanted. And so for me, that's one of the big ways that I'm able to live simply and with less money is by working together, sharing, exchanging, and working with community. And so these front yard gardens, they were started with very little money. The big garden that I started my main one, cost me about between $500 and $600. And within say a half year, that was producing $500 to $600 worth of food per month. And in a matter of few years, this thing had produced easily thousands of dollars worth of food. So it's amazing. I mean, this was just a lawn that was just sand and grass, because Florida used to be under the ocean, and went from a sandy lawn to producing hundreds of dollars worth of food per month, all for, it was definitely some work, but the input was only about $500 to $600 worth. So it was pretty amazing to see what could be done with a lawn.
That's awesome, man. And so what do you mean by harvesting rainwater?
Yeah. So that's another example of, living extremely simply. When I lived in San Diego, California for 5 years, at the end, I lived in a little tiny house there as well. And I lived off the grid. So I wasn't connected to electricity. I wasn't connected to the water system, the municipal systems. And so all of my water came from harvesting rainwater. And it's pretty simple.
San Diego doesn't get a lot of rain, does it?
San Diego doesn't get a lot. It is a desert, which means it gets less than 10 inches of rain per year. And not only that, this was 2015, so it was during the mega drought. But even during the mega drought in a desert, I still was able to harvest enough water in order to live off of. About 5 gallons of water per day is what I had there.
Wow.
And harvesting rainwater. Well, the thing is, you just have to, the average size roof. Well, a roof of about 1,500 square feet can harvest about 10,000 gallons of water per year in San Diego, I believe. Nationwide, it's even more than that. It's amazing how much water we can collect. And so harvesting rainwater is really simple. It's just a matter of having something to collect the water from your downspout, or if you don't even have a downspout, just putting buckets under your drip line of your house where the water comes down and filling that up. And then for drinking it, I just put it through a simple filter. And when I live in Florida, where I lived as well, my drinking water was rainwater, and I really thoroughly enjoy drinking the water from the sky.
That's amazing, man. We need to all learn how to harvest water.
It's crazy that we don't know how. And
that's how I'm feeling right now. It's like, why don't I know how to do this? Feels silly to me, especially living in California.
Yeah. And the crazier thing is, a lot of people think it's illegal because there's these, there's some viral stories that go around about someone getting in trouble for harvesting rainwater. And some of these alternative media sites have very good intentions with doing this. But the problem is, they do these stories, and then all of a sudden people think harvesting rainwater is illegal all over the place, when in reality, it's just an isolated situation. So a lot of cities actually give you rebates for installing rainwater harvesting systems. For example, in San Diego, they give you $1 per gallon system that you can store up to like 300 gallons. So they'll give you $300 back for installing the system, because they want you to do it because they have water shortages. So in a lot of places, where there's water shortages, they actually really, really want you to do this. And again, it's really simple to harvest rainwater. It's just getting that water from the sky into a bucket or a pond or garbage cans that don't have garbage in them, of course.
Where does somebody go to learn that?
Well, let's see.
YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, if you type in how to rainwater harvest on YouTube, you'll definitely find plenty of videos on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually one of the videos that in my YouTube videos where I show my tiny house homestead in both Orlando and in California, I show my rainwater harvesting.
So and actually, I haven't gone to your YouTube channel. So you have a YouTube channel with video on that?
Lots. Actually, now that I think about it, the video is called SoCal's Most Water Conscious Resident ? And that was from when I was using just 2 to 5 gallons of water per day in the mega drought in 2015 in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And that shows how I was harvesting rainwater there. So yeah, I haven't watched that video in a long time, but that is there.
Yeah, so Rob Greenfield is the YouTube channel. I just when it's first thing that comes up, Rob Greenfield, over 200 videos, growing and foraging 100% of my food. Looks like lots of good stuff. So how do you do? So tell us briefly about eating. Then what do you? Some people won't even know what you mean by that foraging. What is it? What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Well, foraging is a term that can be used loosely because all it means is gathering your food. So you could gather your food from your friend's refrigerator or from a grocery store.
Foraging. It's a very elegant term. Dumpster diving.
And dumpster diving is often referred to as urban foraging.
Uh-huh.
I should say that, yes, I've done a lot of dumpster diving for food to raise awareness about food waste and eat for free. That's another example of how I live with very little money. I actually have gone, I think, up to 2 months with eating exclusively from grocery store dumpsters. But this project, the idea of this year of growing and foraging all my food was actually to step away from the global industrial food system, away from any waste of it, and actually see if it was possible to live outside of this system. So for 1 year, no grocery stores, no restaurants, nothing packaged or processed or shipped long distances, not even eating a bite from a friend's pantry or leftovers or anything. Literally everything either had to come from my garden or foraging. And foraging meant collecting it from nature. I'm using quotes around nature because the earth is nature, nature's the earth, there really is no separation. But basically, that could mean going out into the woods and foraging for mushrooms or greens. It could mean finding fruit trees, going to the ocean and collecting food there. So basically, collecting food from the land. And that was in Florida, and that was a really, really wonderful experience. I mean, an entire year where every single thing that I put in my mouth, I harvested directly from the land.
Wow. It's amazing, man. What do you recommend for people who, we talk about the industrial food system, and that's just really tip of the iceberg. Do you have any films or books, like somebody who's maybe, loosely aware of this reality, but, when you really learn about it, it can be, we realize, and part of what I hope happens with our current situation in this global pandemic is we're recognizing certain things that we may have thought to be stable and in reality have never been stable. And we have a lot of systems our lives are built on that are very unstable, certainly not sustainable, and is not a recipe for our children or even in our lifetimes to maintain themselves. It should be an issue of national and world and global security. Where do you have any recommendations on any books, films that jump out to you?
Yeah, definitely. One of the earliest awakenings for me was Food Inc. That is, I just recently watched it, and it was still exactly everything I hoped for. It was made 10 years ago, but it's just perfect thing to watch.
It's a
Food
Michael
Inc.
Pollan film. He's featured.
in it.
Yeah.
But as far as Michael Pollan goes, if you want to go deep, then that would be The Omnivore's Dilemma. And that's one of my favorite books by Michael Pollan. And if you want one book that can really wrap your head around the reality of your food, The Omnivore's Dilemma is it. He goes into, most facets of it. And he goes into big organic and those things as well. He doesn't go into permaculture so much, but that book is really, really one of my absolute favorites. And actually on my website, if you go to robgreenfield.org/books, that's a list of books, and then /films is a list of films that I recommend. Earthlings was a documentary that I watched early on that taught me about our relationship with animals and in factory farming. And that's a big, shocking one that I definitely would recommend. But yeah, Food Inc., if you just started with one, I mean, that one's a big wake up.
Yeah. What are some things that we can do? What are some simple things that we all can do to help move our lives in the right direction within the context that we're talking about here today?
Yeah. So for me, I generally start with food, because food is the center of our lives. It's the center of our social lives. It is, something that most of us do at least 3 times every day. And it is one of the ways that we cause the most impact in the world, whether for better or worse. So for food, some of the things that I recommend are eating whole foods as much as possible. So less processed foods that have long lists of ingredients that you can't, pronounce or understand. Whole foods. Another one is local, sourcing as much food as you can locally. Going to the local farmers market is a great place to start. If you have a food co-op, that can be a very life-changing place. You can really start to, surround yourself by a community of people who want to eat healthier and more sustainably. Organic is helpful, but more important to know the farmers. USDA organic. The label, we know who runs the USDA. It's the current administration, so that should tell you that it's not a perfect system by any means, far from. But especially local organic, smaller farms rather than the big farms. Unpackaged food, so eating as much food that doesn't leave behind garbage for future generations. So with produce, buying whole fruits and vegetables, and then finding stores that have a bulk food section where you can go and fill up your grains and your nuts and your seeds and your dried fruits. And a lot of them, you can fill up the olive oil or vinegars and things like that. So those would be some of my big ones. And then one of the big ones is making sure, if possible, to avoid factory farmed animals. And, if you're in an environment where it's not possible to get a sustainable, any sort of meat or animal products, avoiding that. Now, there's plenty of people who live off the land or who live in environments and can, support regenerative farming. And that's another, another possibility as well. So those would be some thoughts on food. A couple other things to name, some of the big changers. As much as possible, trying to park the car, ride a bike, walk, use public transportation. It's a big game changer because just it gets you so much more involved with your community. You're exercising rather than sitting in a car, angry with traffic, and so many facets. It can be life-changing. Supporting local businesses as much as possible. So finding local small businesses. If you need tools, and go to the local tools hardware store rather than the big box store. Farmers markets, again, are a good place to start with that.
I think
those would be some thoughts.
I think my sense is with the work you're doing, there's, in addition to all of these important little lifestyle adjustments, which really they're not that. These things are really things that make life more enjoyable. They may be a change, and change can sometimes feel inconvenient at first, but after that initial kind of shift, these are things that just make our lives these are all things that help us enjoy our lives. I think with the work you're doing, who knows how many other people you've inspired, or little light bulbs have gone off, and then they're gonna create this system here, and this person's going to create the system there. Even when I think that's the beauty of everyone doing what they're all about, because then it inspires, like what you're doing inspires me to go a little deeper and like, all right, so where in my work does there need to be, do we need to have the permaculture chapter of the permaculture, education inside of the Life Force Academy? Why? And so if each one of us is paying attention to like, what is our life all about? That's how things really start, I think, to accelerate in terms of all of us being able to live in a harmonious fashion, both individually and together. And to me, that's really the great brilliance of what you're doing, Rob.
Thanks, and that's exactly how I feel. There's two aspects. I mean, part of me doesn't like to talk about the small individual changes, because really my focus is it's the philosophy. It's about radically thinking differently about the world. And so I really, for me, that's what it's about. It's about shifting the mindset. However, what I've seen is that one of the best ways to shift the mindset is first to shift the actions, because if you have daily actions that you're able to practice, that you incorporate into your life, that's what little by little can change the way that you think. And so that's why I think that, I don't like to talk about not using plastic straws, for example, because it's so minute in the grand scheme of the world. However, if you can do 100 little things differently, that will be, to me, that's the transformation and the solid foundation that helps set you forward into a radically different way of thinking and being. And ultimately, I think that's what we need today, is we need a radically different way of thinking and being. But we have to embrace where we are. We have to start where we are. We can only be us. We can only be in the place we are and in the time we are. And that's where we have to start. And for some of us, that's going to be starting with some very small little ways of changing our lives in order to get to the bigger picture of really deeply living the lives that we want, that we can, rest knowing that we are living in a way that is much more equal and just and sustainable.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The bigger philosophy, the bigger context. I think about that a lot, even when working with people. So if I'm going to do like a meditation practice every day, I have to stay connected to the bigger reasons of why I'm doing it, as opposed to focusing on the details or the minute things. I also need to stay connected to what's the bigger reason why I'm using reusable grocery bags or getting my olive oil in a reusable container. Because if it's only about that stuff and I'm not connected to the bigger context of things, I always think about context is more important than content. Context is, all right, what is going on the global scale? How am I connected to it? How does it affect my life? But how does my life affect every other person's life? And where do I have a moral responsibility? Then I have a big why, WHY. And if I can somehow stay connected to the big why of these things, then I'm willing to do all the little things. And not only am I willing to do them, I feel like it's like a warrior's responsibility to do them, and therefore I have the inspiration, motivation to do the little things that if enough people are doing the little things, it starts to make big changes.
I feel the same, brother.
Yeah, man. Cool. Hey, man. Thanks so much for chatting with me. I think it's just the beginning. I'll be continuing to tell folks about you and watching your work, and hopefully sooner than later we will end up in the same place on the globe and get to hang a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. If I had a podcast, you'd be on it.
Well, since you told me one of your goals is to have no technology at one day, I'm not counting the days till that happens.
No, but I very much look forward to a real life sit down, and I'm going to be telling more people about the Life Force Academy. I mean, I think it's you and I are doing things. We're using different mediums for, I think, the same goal. And I see the way you're doing things as an extremely important piece of the puzzle. And I'm going to keep telling people about it. And we need all of us together just doing our little things to making the change.
Right on, man. Well, cool. Enjoy your time in France. And thanks so much again.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll keep you posted. Now that this world trip is over, there's definitely a chance I'll end up in California this summer or this fall. So I'll keep you posted and hopefully be able to come up there, and one of these days hopefully be able to take one of your immersive courses.
And that'd be great. You can even forage in our refrigerator if need be. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Rob Greenfield. Again, check his website out, robgreenfield.tv, or Rob Greenfield on YouTube. He has a great YouTube channel. Big following, this guy. Cool person. Love his work. Thanks again to the Life Force Academy. Go check it out. Do some Kundalini yoga from your home, wherever you are. Great Kundalini yoga practices with great music. Really uplifting. Lifeforce.academy is the URL for that. Begin your $1 trial to the Life Force Academy and check it out. New Simrit music coming out soon. the live Los Angeles from this past fall. You're hearing a little bit of it right now. It's incredible. I've had the pleasure of listening to it a number of times already. It's going to be released, I believe, in the coming weeks. Can't wait for everyone to hear it. Check out Simrit on your Spotify or wherever you get your music. SIMRIT. Stay safe, everyone. If you can, stay home. If you're listening to this and we're still in the pandemic time, those of you who are out there and are not able to stay home because you're an essential worker, thank you so much for everything you're doing for us. Take care, everyone. Talk to you soon.